So we are now on the third plague, which is the plague of gnats in Exodus chapter 8, verse 16 and up to verse 19. So let's read Exodus chapter 8, verse 16. It says, "So the Lord said to Moses, 'Tell Aaron, raise your staff and strike the ground. The dust will turn into swarms of gnats throughout the land of Egypt.'" Verse 17, "So Moses and Aaron did just as the Lord had commanded them. When Aaron raised his hand and struck the ground with his staff, gnats infested the entire land, covering the Egyptians and their animals. All the dust in the land of Egypt turned into gnats." And in verse 18, Pharaoh's magicians tried to do the same thing with their secret arts, but this time they failed. And the gnats covered everyone, people and animals alike. "This is the finger of God," the magicians exclaimed to Pharaoh. But Pharaoh's heart remained hard. He wouldn't listen to them, just as the Lord had predicted. So, what is a plague? A plague means a severe disaster or affliction sent by God, usually as a judgment or warning. Plagues in Exodus. So in the book of Exodus, plagues were supernatural events that God brought upon Egypt to, number one, show his power over the false Egyptian gods. So this is all about the Egyptian gods that the Egypt had. And then number two is the punishment. To punish Pharaoh for his hardness of heart. And number three, enforce him to release the Israelites from slavery. So this time around, the Lord sent plagues to the Egyptians, especially to Pharaoh, so that Pharaoh will release the Israelites out of Egypt. So the question here is, what are gnats? So gnats are tiny flying insects similar to small mosquitoes or sand flies. And gnats, they often swarm in large numbers, bite humans and animals, cause itching and irritation, and lastly, are almost impossible to escape when there are many of them. So this is the picture of gnats. So para siyang small na fly. It is like a small fly. So imagine the dust of Egypt turning into countless biting insects. It would have been unbearable. So you can read that in Exodus chapter 8, verse 17. It says there, "So Moses and Aaron did just as the Lord had commanded them. When Aaron raised his hand and struck the ground with his staff, gnats infested the entire land, covering the Egyptians and their animals. All the dust in the land of Egypt turned into gnats." Why was gnats the third plague? So this is the answer. The third plague was God's direct attack on the Egyptian magicians and their gods. So it is a direct attack on the Egyptian magicians and especially to their man-made gods. Here's what happened and why it mattered. Number one, God turned dust into gnats. Moses and Aaron struck the ground with Aaron's staff, and the dust became gnats. They showed God's power over the very earth itself, the dust of the ground, something no human or idol could control. And number two, the magicians failed. The magicians of Egypt tried to copy the miracle, but they couldn't. That's when they said to Pharaoh, "This is the finger of God," which we can find it in Exodus chapter 8, verse 19. And we can read that here. It says, "This is the finger of God." The magicians exclaimed to Pharaoh, but Pharaoh's heart remained hard. He wouldn't listen to them, just as the Lord had predicted. So even the magicians recognized that this plague came from the true God, not from magic or tricks. And number three, it targeted the god Geb. Egyptians worship Geb, the god of the earth. By turning the dust of the earth into a swarm of insects, God was showing that He alone rules over the earth, not Geb. So what lesson we can learn here? The spiritual lesson. The plague of gnats teaches that number one, God can use even the smallest creatures to humble the proud. Number two, human power and magic cannot stand against the true God. And number three, God's goal was not just punishment, but revelation, to show that there is no one like Him. And we can read that in Exodus chapter 9, verse 14. It says, "If you don't, I will send more plagues on you and your officials and your people. Then you will know that there is no one like me in all the earth." So in Life Application Commentary in verse 19 it says, "Some people think, if only I could see a miracle, I could believe in God." God gave Pharaoh just such an opportunity. When gnats infested Egypt, even the magicians agreed that this was God's work, the finger of God. But still Pharaoh refused to believe. He was stubborn, and stubbornness can blind a person to the truth. When you rid yourself of stubbornness, you may be surprised by the abundant evidence of God's work in your life.